Today, I am beginning a series called Stations of the Resurrection. The Church has traditionally embraced what is called the Stations of the Cross, a series of steps that immerse us in the suffering involved in the crucifixion story. But the Church has never focused the same amount of energy or ingenuity when it comes to the good news of the resurrection. While our traditions saw that it took focus and effort to understand the role of suffering in transforming our story and the story of humanity, it has failed to understand that arriving at an Easter way of living is also a journey. It takes just as much effort and discipline to unfold a resurrection life. This concept of having stations of the resurrection was first introduced in the summer of 1988 by Father Sabino Palumbieri, professor of anthropology at the Salesian University. But it has never really gained traction. I find it ironic and sad that in that same year, Stephen Covey wrote a book called The 7 Habits of Highly Successful People that became a bestseller. But the Church never adopted its own version of the habits that are needed to be a truly successful Christian. The point is simple. An Easter life, a life filled with joy, courage, purpose, peace, justice, and hope, it just doesn't happen. And it didn't just happen to the disciples either. There were steps. There were habits involved. There were stations involved. And we're going to look at some of them in the weeks ahead. Well, the station we are arriving at today could be summed up as the station of shared story. We so desperately need this station because we are so bad at it. People love to tell their story, but we often fail in taking the time to ask about it or listen to it. And today, we have two people walking home from Jerusalem, away from their dream, feeling the weight of dashed hopes, but walking together, open to sharing their story with one another. It's the story of the road to Emmaus. It's a story about folks whose future was ripped away from them, and they are afraid and devastated. Sound familiar? But they practice at sharing their stories and discovering a deeper connection they share that has been there all along. Now, just in case you are wondering if I'm avoiding any reference to Earth Day, I am not. In fact, the Earth has always been teaching us about our connectivity. We just passed the 50th anniversary of the first Earth Day, a day that most will not notice because the headlines of huge celebrations or marches were simply not there, thanks to the coronavirus. But none of us can ignore the headlines about what's happening to the Earth during human quarantine. The headlines abound about how reefs are healing, how the air is clearing, how animals are thriving. This has caused some to consider whether we are a virus infecting this planet through our self-centered behavior, and that perhaps the immune system of the planet has found a way to slow this infection down. I don't buy it because such a view is based on the very premise that has encouraged our disconnection from the Earth, seeing the Earth as something for our use, not something we are in intimate relationship with. That mistaken premise implies that we are not part of creation. What we need to embrace anew is to remember that we are a part of creation, and creation is part of us. And the two cannot be separated. Our problem is not that we are an unwelcome infection, but rather that we have forgotten what we are profoundly connected to, the Earth, and to one another. Yes, we have forgotten that we are profoundly connected to each other. We're living in a time when we are being taught about how our behavior impacts everyone else, and that their behavior in turn impacts us. We are seeing clearly how our presence on this planet has a huge impact in its health. We are being called back into right relationship with all people and all creation. And may this experience be burned into our understanding of who we are and become part of the story of our generation, handed down to our children's children. May this true narrative replace the misguided ones. I think the entire world has arrived at the station of shared story. Some are resisting this by keeping divisiveness alive. But we are also seeing real power, real hope, real love emerging all around us as people come together with a shared struggle, a shared story. So how can each of us be present to and benefit from this station of the resurrection? Quite simply, walk with someone. I don't mean that literally, given the restrictions around social distancing, but I do mean it metaphorically and spiritually. You can walk with someone on the phone, on FaceTime, on Zoom. When you walk with someone, you and they cannot get away with the one-word responses. How are you? Fine. Great. Have a good day. You too. When you walk with someone, you tend to be more curious and courageous in your conversation. How are your children? Where did you grow up? What was that like? Walking can lead to empathy because you are open to actually walking into another person's story. And you just might let them walk into your story as well. I noticed that in this scripture today, we only have the name of one disciple, Cleopas. I wonder if the nameless disciple is an invitation to place ourselves in that story, to imagine ourselves telling and retelling our story and listening to the story in another way and from another perspective. So, as I try to connect with people, I've been making phone calls, and I had a goal. I had a goal that I was going to try to call 10 people a day. And the first day, I succeeded. I spent a few hours of my day talking to about 10 people. The second time, I found that I ended up talking to maybe 7, maybe less in the same time frame. The other day, I had a conversation with 3 people over 3 hours. I am becoming more and more inefficient. That's something I would never have celebrated. But I'm choosing to listen and participate and share and slow down as I walk the road to Emmaus. This is not intentional on my part. It's simply one surprise that's happened to me in this new age in which we're living in. The stations of shared story is perfect for this moment in history. We are so scheduled that our default mode is to not spend time with others in any profound way. We should consider the opportunity we have at this point in history, if not for yourself, for the sake of another. And about that, one of my favorite people I've never met is a guy named Don Ritchie. Ritchie once served in the Royal Australian Navy and afterwards became a life insurance salesman. And what is somewhat ironic in becoming a life insurance salesman is that when he retired, he was credited with saving 160, maybe up to 500 lives. He did this by intentionally walking with others. He and his wife lived across from the Gap, a cliff in Sydney, Australia, which had the unfortunate reputation of being the most popular place in the country for suicides. Richie's house was right across the street. So he spent much of his time sitting on his front porch, watching people, noticing if they were alone or in distress. If he thought they were in distress, he would go up to them and ask them, "Can I help you in any way?" He might invite them back to his house for tea. The testimonies of those he saved are moving. The common theme in all of their stories was that they were feeling a profound sense of loneliness and isolation, a real danger right now. Richie embraced the discipline of walking with another. He embraced the station of shared stories. And in 2006, he was awarded the Medal of the Order of Australia for his rescues. What amazes me about the gospel story is how Jesus helps them frame their story within the story of God. So even though our lives can seem insignificant, they are not. They are part of the great story of God's love and resurrection power. Of course, the climax of the story is when they break bread with Jesus and discover he is there with them. In that day, breaking bread with another was a sign of complete welcome and trust. When our stories connect, we will discover God in the middle of them. So as we sit on our metaphorical porch, may we also keep on the lookout for someone to walk with. May we take the time to be with others, if not physically, at least online or on the phone. I invite you to be present to and adventurous with the station of shared story in the coming week. I look forward to meeting you at another station of the resurrection next week. Amen.